and welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli, that's Bud Elliott, that's Danny Kanell. I'm Chip Patterson, coming to you live at youtube.com/Cover3 and everywhere you get your podcasts on demand. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe, smash that like, and come and join us in the chat, a.k.a. the Cover 3 Tailgate. We got lots of good questions from Lane and Keith and Eric, the Real Coconut, Brett, and so much more. But I wanted to give a shout-out to someone who just jumped in, and that is our friend, the DPS All Football Talk. He gets it going. He says, love the show, guys, but a question for Bud. Bud, what have you learned from summer school so far that has changed your opinion about any certain team for 2025? Yes, we have the summer school series continues to rock and roll and fill your feed with all the information you need to get ready for the 2025 season. So, yeah, I mean, what do you think for our guy DPS? Is from the conversations that you've had, where do you find yourself even changing your priors a little bit?
Sure, just from some of the recent episodes, Boston College, I think, still feels pretty good about their offensive line. Talking to Mitchell Wolf, defensive line is probably going to be the question there for the Eagles. And it's always good to figure out, like, hey, what do they feel about like the next group of guys coming up? Or do they feel like there's not a drop off, or do they feel like there will be a pretty good drop off there? With Colorado coming out on Sunday, a much more run and defense heavy team, it appears this year. Arizona State is one interesting to me, also coming out, coming up. I was talking to Chris Cartman of Sun Devil Source, and he was talking, and I was like, man, they just stayed so damn healthy last year compared to the prior 2 years where it was literally like a MASH report every week. They were probably in the aggregate the most injured team between 22 and 23, the Sun Devils, that is. And last year I felt like they just stayed, super healthy. They get a lot of that nice, kind of nasty offensive line back. So that was one that definitely, it looked like taking a look at that. What else here? Duke's coming out soon. I don't think Duke's going to have a major drop off in terms of quality of play. They might actually be a better team this year. I don't know if they're going to have as many wins as they did last year. They did run pretty good in some close games, and they certainly did. Maybe they caught some teams at the right time as well. But I think I'm higher on Duke coming out of that interview with Adam than I was entering the interview. And that's even accounting for Mensa being there. So a lot of those are coming up. Definitely must listens.
Yeah, on the Duke front, I know Manny Diaz has been using this a lot as he's been going around doing the sort of post-spring conversation. But I mean, that he's just excited that they had enough healthy bodies to have an offensive line. Like, I don't know if you remember spring practice last year, but they could not field full scrimmages. And so the confidence, at least from the coaches' room, is like, well, heck yeah, we had the best spring we've had since we showed up in December of last year. So I definitely get that positivity along the way. Lots of more of your comments coming throughout the show, some of which are related to our big topic coming up in just a little bit, our annual strength of schedule analysis. All four of us have been tasked with putting together our top 5 easiest and toughest schedules, keeping our focus a little bit more on the power conferences. But of course, if you want to throw Memphis out there and point to them as having a wildly manageable schedule, yeah, I would take that as well. But I think our focus will be elsewhere. But we begin with a couple headlines, one of which I think has 2 levels to it. There is the coaching move itself. We were talking about Vince Morrow, longtime Kentucky assistant, leaving Kentucky to go join Jeff Brom at rival Louisville. I think there is the what does Kentucky lose? I think there is the what does Louisville gain? But there's also the what does it mean for Mark Stoops? And should we read into this at all? Danny, I see you nodding your head. Vince joined Mark Stoops at Kentucky for the 2013 season. He has been a recruiting coordinator. He has been a key coach in terms of being the associate head coach, just sort of driving force for that entire program right now. What are you starting to read into the tea leaves a little bit about what this might mean for both of those programs moving forward?
Potentially. I do think there's something there, but I also think there's like this business is about relationships, and clearly Vince and Stoops have a really good relationship. They've been together a long time. He also has a really good relationship with Jeff Brom, where they played together in the XFL as teammates.
Oh, great.
Brom had already tried to hire him away when he was at Purdue. had already tried when he first got the job at Louisville. So, like, this isn't the first time just like randomly this comes up. Clearly, there's a relationship that's been built before, but more about the Stoops future. Like, I wonder, like, I think Stoops clearly lost a lot of goodwill with his own fan base and maybe even his own coaching staff when he was on the runway ready to go to Texas A&M. Like, and I do wonder if that has some people concerned. And then, like, this is a huge year. 4-8 isn't going to cut it. And then I think it gets interesting. Like, well, does 6-6, which probably should, but I don't know if it does. And then there's one John Sumrall who's tearing it up. Looks like this head coach in waiting almost with the connect the dots of where he played and already coached previously. It feels like he'd be the guy that Kentucky would go after. So but in saying all that, Mark Stoops' buyout is pretty significant. And now, like, are we going to still have programs, let alone it's Kentucky, they're going to have the willingness to write a check in this uncertain landscape with revenue share and everybody's tightening the reins? Are you going to be able to just cut a check to say, all right, we've had enough of Mark Stoops? So yes and no, I guess, is kind of the way I look at it. I think it is concerning if you're a Kentucky fan, if you want Mark Stoops to be the future, but if you're kind of like ready to see him out the door, you're like, this might be the first sign.
I don't think it's the first sign. I think it's one of a number of signs. I think you look at it, I think you kind of touched on some of it, but there was the Texas A&M thing. And then, as you mentioned, this is not the first time Marrow's been approached by Louisville or Jeff Brom. It's not the first time Marrow's been approached by a bunch of programs who've been interested in him before his ability and what he's done, help getting some talent to that Kentucky roster. But for some reason, in June, months before the season begins, this was the time when he decided, yeah, you know what, I'm going to make the move. And I'm going to go to our in-state rival at the same time. So, we got our ballots this week for our hot seat rankings, because now that the great Dennis Dodd has retired, we're doing it as a team, in which we were all, like we're doing with our coach rankings, we were filling out our ballots for hot seats, and then we're going to see which coaches are on the hot seat based on our votes. I bumped Mark up a number after I heard the Marrow news. I was like, I had him at a certain spot, and I went back to the document and said, we're gonna kick that up one little number, because I do feel like it's everything that's happened at Kentucky the last few years. None of it feels good. Like, they had they had a really great run. Stoops was ready to take the A&M job. That falls through. He comes back. They have a horrible season last year. They've got another difficult schedule coming up, and there's a lot of question marks about how good they're going to be. And then just the timing of it. There's a coach at Tulane who was very good at Troy, who got the Tulane job, who is somebody who, if he has another good season at Tulane, is going to have a lot of Kentucky people that are saying, we need to get this guy. So I just feel like with everything that's happening in Lexington and some of the things that are happening outside of Lexington, I feel like the writing's on the wall. I think Kentucky has to have a very good season, or else we might see a coaching change this off season.
Isn't the buyout there huge?
Yeah.
40 something. Is it 40 million plus? It's massive.
But money, we're paying our players $20 million a year now. $40 million isn't really, that's not as much, the money doesn't matter anymore. Money isn't real.
44 million.
How much did they save by getting Calipari to Arkansas, then getting in Mark Pope? That's got to be at least a $15 million in savings alone right there.
I was going to say, I mean, the reports are Kentucky has the most expensive basketball roster in the country going into next season. There's frugality does not seem to be at top of mind right now for Kentucky athletics.
Correction. So it was 44 like mid-season last year. It's 37.5 if you do it after the 25 season.
Still a chunk.
The thing is, it is due within 60 days in full. So like that at times has been an issue. That was the Kevin Sumlin. That ring a bell for you guys? Like, remember, like, it was a big deal that it was like, oh, the whole nut is due like almost like within 30 days, I think it is. So I wonder.
Is the buyout that much of a hindrance for you to start to imagine that this is the end? Because I'll tell you Rick Bozich, right, who's been a long time columnist in the area. The headline, losing Vince Marr to Louisville feels like the end is near for Mark Stoops at Kentucky. Like the conversation around that state and around that area is going to be about Well, that was a kind of what Tom was mentioning. Yeah, that was a really good run. The NFL players that were coming through, these 8, 9, 10 win seasons. I mean, he showed us what it meant to be, but thanks. But it's time for us to move in a different direction now. Things have gotten a little bit stale. He's been there a long, long time. I could see I could see this continuing where a buyout, a financial issue is not going to be prohibitive enough to continue without any kind of spark, because then you end up losing money just by continuing to not generate the new donations, to be able to reinvigorate your boosters. It's what you tell people all the time, that the athletic directors have to lie to their boosters to be able to get them to keep giving. And I think that's what they might be facing at Kentucky.
I can see that. It might also depend on who can you go get?
John Summerall.
Well, but if Summerall has another good year, he's going to do better than Kentucky.
But do we know if anything better than Kentucky will open up?
What are the odds that LSU and Florida and Auburn are all not open in the same year? I would say 0.
Are you going to add Oklahoma to that?
And Oklahoma, right.
Yeah.
I think the chance that those 4 jobs all retain the same guys are 0.0. Because they all play each other. Somebody's going 7-5 and getting fired.
What if Kentucky doesn't have to pay?
And Arkansas. Arkansas is a better job than Kentucky.
Hold on, what you asked, Tom?
So what if Kentucky doesn't have to pay a buyout?
If he retires?
Or if he goes to Iowa?
What if a certain coach who's turning 70 in August decides that this year is his last year and an opening comes in Iowa City?
And Brett Bielema turns it down?
Danny, let's go.
We're talking about former players going back to their alma maters.
Danny, when your teams go 2-10, maybe you worry about your coaches being gone.
Why
But
you
when you
always
win
take it
10
personal?
games, your coaches have no reason to leave because they're at the better program.
Why you always got to make it personal?
We don't need to linger on 2-10. It's the unprecedented 17th place finish in the ACC. That's the hanging banner for it right there. All right. So what about the positives? Oh, Louisville got a terrific recruiter who's been recruiting in that area, who's been finding players who are maybe a little bit overlooked and helping develop them to the NFL. Louisville has been a heavy transfer portal team every single year since Jeff Brom has arrived. You get someone like this, maybe this is the beginning to being able to build up what I would consider personally more sustainable, which is when you get that high school recruiting rolling. This is massive, I think, for the Cards and sort of the 5-year outlook for Jeff Brom right there.
One more thing on the Stoops thing, if I could, before we close that out, because AI finally gave this back to me. So Mark Stoops' career record against each SEC team. I think this is illuminating as to if you're going to take that job. Obviously, you take it because you're going to get rich. You're not going to go to the playoff at Kentucky probably ever. Bama 0-4, Arkansas 0-1. That almost feels incorrect, but all right.
They never played.
Auburn 0-3, Florida 3-9. They beat them in 18, 21, and 22. Georgia 0-12, LSU 1-12 or 1-2. Mississippi State 6-6, Missouri 5-7, Ole Miss 2-3. Including last year, which mattered a whole lot for the playoff race. South Carolina 6-6, Tennessee 2-10, Texas 0-1, A&M 1-2, and Vandy 6-6. So, if South Carolina has their act together, and Tennessee is not a Jeremy Pruitt, clown show, and Drinkwitz has Missouri going in kind of the right direction, that's a really hard job. And getting out of the East, it kind of kills them.
Is Louisville a better job? Head coach. Forget about Vince.
Yes.
Louisville's a better job than Kentucky?
I think so, yeah.
You have a much more realistic path to a conference title and a playoff berth at Louisville than you do at Kentucky.
I mean, Charlie Strong had him playing in the Sugar Bowl against Florida. They've had recent success. You can see their top end. I mean, they have Heisman Trophy winners. They've been on the cusp of the playoff conversation. And also the path is a heck of a lot easier.
Did they go to an Orange Bowl as well?
They might have.
I believe so.
Wait, are you talking about the Petrino Orange Bowl?
They might have.
I think they
went to around there for a few years.
Trying to dump my 16 tickets to that one was a rough one, I think. Doesn't anybody want to go?
What?
They went to a Sugar Bowl and an Orange Bowl in 2006.
They played Wake Forest in the Orange
Who
Bowl
could
in
forget that
2006.
game?
Yeah. That was
Okay.
after Wake Forest beat Georgia Tech 9-6 in the ACC championship game.
In the 06 game?
Yeah, in Jacksonville.
Back when the Big East was a football conference.
All right. Coming up on the other side, we've got our ranking of the easiest and toughest schedules. Plus, Tom has done the hard work. So now, you can put him to the test. Who's got the best running back room in the country? All that and more next.
The clock never stops. Relive the greatest moments with uninterrupted highlights and more. It's Gareth Bale! Wonderful goal! On the UEFA Champions League channel. Streaming free.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast as we continue to roll through the positional rankings at CBSSports.com. Our own Tom Fornelli had an interesting task, and I call it interesting because last year we had Ashton Jeanty sort of throwback to the dynamite workhorse superstar running back. We had kind of been missing it. You had your Derrick Henry about a decade ago, but the way that offenses had been going, the way that quarterbacks and even like wide receivers winning the Heisman Trophy, we really hadn't had, that superstar running back, brought it back into the college football consciousness. Tom has ranked the top, not just running backs, but running back rooms for the entire country. Tom, when you were, I just wanted to at least open it with this question. What do you think the state of running backs is in college football right now? Does it feel like we've got stars at the position? And if so, who are those names that will probably dominate that conversation?
I don't think we have an Ashton Jeanty, if that's what you mean. I think we have a lot of very good running backs, but there isn't a Jeanty or a Saquon Barkley or like those kind of stratosphere of players. I think that there are some really, really good spots where we'll talk about Penn State. They were number one on my list. They've got Nick Singleton and Katron Allen coming back, both of whom rushed for 1,000 yards at least last season. They're very good. I don't know if you would put either of them on like the superstar tier, but together in that offense, that's a really good room to have, especially with those two, because we know they're proven. My favorite back is, I've said even last year, I think he's better than Jeanty. I love Jeremiah Love. I think talent-wise and skill-wise, he's probably the best running back in the country. He's not, to me, somebody who I would probably take him in the first round. I don't know if NFL teams are going to take him in the top 10 like they did with Jeanty, because Jeanty was such a workhorse. I think Love can be that workhorse. It's just he doesn't need to be, because the reason Notre Dame is number 2 on my list is that there are other players there named Jadarian Price and Aeneas Williams and Kedron Young. Like they have a really deep squad, so they're able to rotate guys and keep them fresh all season long, whereas Boise just had to give the ball to Jeanty 50 times a game. So to answer your question long-windedly, no, there is not a superstar, but there are a lot of very, very good players.
Who else? Let's round out that list, right? What was your top 5?
As you can see on the screen, if you were watching, it was Penn State at number 1, Notre Dame at 2, Oregon at 3, Texas 4, and then Louisville, who, wow, this is apparently the Louisville hour here on the Cover 3 pod. I had them at 5. I've talked about the first two. With Oregon, I think the addition of Mekhi Hughes from Tulane is huge. He was one of the best backs in the country last year, even if he didn't get a ton of national attention because Tulane's not exactly moving the needle for most people. But he's going to come in and he's going to take the workhorse role. But they still have Noah Whittington, who was very productive as a secondary back for them last year, as well as DeJuan Riggs. 4th is Texas. One of the reasons we were concerned about the Longhorns going into last season was the injury to C.J. Baxter just before the season began. He tore his LCL and his PCL in his knee. He was out for the year. Texas still did pretty well without him, but he's back. There are some question marks about how he's going to look coming off the injury, but I think we've seen plenty of instances in the past where guys are able to recover from these a lot better than they had been before. So I'm still optimistic. He was a very good player coming out of high school. He was very highly rated for a reason. They also still have Quintervion Wisner, Jarrett Gibson, tons of depth there. And then 5th, I had Louisville just because I think Isaac Brown was probably the most slept on running back in the country last year. Wasn't super highly rated. I think he was a 3-star coming out of high school, but he was very, very productive and I think the only reason he was a 3-star, and Bud, maybe you can confirm this, is because he's 5'9" and 180.
Yeah.
Like if he'd have been the same player, but 6 feet and 205, he's probably a 4-star. So, he jumps into that offense, and surprise, surprise, Jeff Brom knows how to use a running back. He had 1,168 yards, averaged over 7 yards per clip. And then there was Duke Watson, also behind him, who averaged nearly 9 yards per carry. Like that was a very explosive tandem. I think that they are somewhat of a dangerous team in the ACC this year. They're kind of like, they're not a dark horse or a sleeper because we have mentioned them, but I just don't think enough people realize how good the running backs the Cardinals have are.
Danny, Bud, any thoughts looking at that list? What stands out?
I think 1 and 2 is very debatable, and then I think there's a pretty good drop off after that. Like Texas, certainly the health of Baxter is going to determine it, right? Like if he returns to be that guy who also is a really good pass catching threat, I think Texas could make a whole lot of noise. I like Florida's backs too.
Yeah.
I think Michigan's backfield could be pretty interesting.
Justice Haynes joining that
and
room.
Marshall.
Oh yeah.
I might like Jordan. I might like Marshall over Haynes even, but like that's a very nice 1-2 combo there. People are saying Georgia in the chat. If the kid can hold on to the ball, yeah, he just. When he actually has the ball in his hands, he is electric. The problem is when the ball is on the ground, which with him is far too often. Even though if you look at like the ones he lost versus the ones he recovered, Miami's backs. Just looking at the chat here, yeah, not bad. What's his name bounced back pretty well from that injury that he suffered in the 23 bowl game against Rutgers. He was better. If he takes another step and can show that top gear, I think Miami could enter that conversation for sure. They do have some young freshmen who they like a lot. A&M is another one off injury concerns, right? Reuben Owens is back from injury. Le'Veon Moss was good for them last year. I think A&M's got a really sneaky good offensive line this year. There's a lot of backfields that have a nice 1-2 punch. I don't know how many like 30 carry guys are going to be out there this year at the top level. People are saying Florida in the chat. I don't hate that one either. I think that's a nice one. Yeah.
Lagway could take some of those numbers too. But the honorable mentions in my list that didn't make the top 5 were Georgia, Minnesota, Oklahoma, and A&M.
Oh, OU is a good one too, for sure.
Yeah.
Adding Jake Knott. Yeah.
I think too, the running back position, it felt like for a time, and I know this was NFL level, like no one was paying them. They were diminished value. I think there's been a resurgence of physical running backs, like the bigger backs. And if you look at the last couple, the Michigan's run with Blake Corum in the backfield, and like Bud said, a lot of 1-2 punches because they're utilizing them the more. It feels like the return to physicality as, when Bama was winning with Tua and throwing it around a little bit more and the receivers became so like the premier players, you need a receiver. I think there's been a little bit resurgence of a physicality of the run game, which I think is a good thing. It's sort of the ebbs and flows of the dynamics of the sport. Like you always hear coaches, well, we want to run the football, but I think there's been more of a commitment to run the football, and it's led to a lot of success for a lot of teams.
Is it not as, if I was to oversimplify it, they're losing a linebacker, they're bringing on a nickel back. Let's see if that nickel can tackle.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got a little 190-pound something in that gap. Let's see what it's going to look like against what our force coming downhill. I saw a comment in Tailgate earlier. This past NFL draft, and of course the Tailgate doesn't even need to get fact checked. They're always on it. But this past NFL draft, the most number of running backs drafted in the last maybe 5 or 6 years. It's to your point, Danny. This is it is starting to become a more premium position in the game at large. And so a lot of fun. So check that out over on CBSSports.com. Full positional rankings weeks going on. We've got some of our other colleagues weighing in on the other position rooms. Will Backus got the top wide receiver rooms up on the site today. Well, coming up on the other side, we turn our attention to strength of schedule. Before we do win totals, we got to do the schedule analysis. So we'll get into our easiest and toughest and more next.
Get ready.
Wait a second. I thought we were going tubing.
All 3 Sonic the Hedgehog movies and Knuckles are now streaming on Paramount Plus.
And everyone loves it.
Every adventure.
Just try to keep up.
Every face-off.
This ends now.
And every moment that will have you saying,
Where have you been?
My entire life!
It's showtime.
All 3 Sonic the Hedgehog movies and the entire Sonic universe are now streaming on Paramount+.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, as we were all tasked individually with putting together our top 5 toughest schedules and our top 5 easiest schedules. Now, there was one team that, according to producer Mikey, has shown up on all of ours. So I think that would be an interesting way to start. So DK, let's go with your top 5, and we'll dig in on your number 1 here early on in the proceedings. So why don't you unveil our
toughest or easiest or both?
Tough. No, just toughest for
toughest. All right, just toughest. Now, I had a little bit of a different take on this. When I determined toughest, one of the things I was looking for was how many Power 5 opponents you're playing. Like, and if you played 4 Power 4, because there was some that I saw on a lot of lists that still had like 3 easy and it just, to me, I wanted to see who you're playing out of conference, what types of games you're playing. So I had for the number 1 toughest, it's come up in a bunch. I don't know if it'd be number 1 on yours, but Wisconsin. We talked about it last year, was such a tough schedule. Once again, playing Alabama, this time on the road for Luke Fickell. And then the in-conference slate is not much kinder to them. I don't have it up here in front of me. I'm trying to get it here up for me if Mikey keyed it up there. But I had Wisconsin on the list at number 1 for me.
All right. So for Wisconsin, here's what I've got in my notes. Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, Illinois, plus at Indiana. Now, I don't think Indiana is going to be a preseason top 25 team, but they could sneak in there based on how the voters behave. But with Alabama in there as well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 top 25 teams, according to the preseason poll. And who knows what they would do with Iowa as well. I'm with you on Wisconsin. I've got Wisconsin at number 2 on mine. So look, Miami, Ohio is a championship contender in the MAC. They are
right.
Like, they are not going to be an easy pushover. You mentioned the road trip to Alabama. This is one where in a season, and we find this so often, and we will have this also here in this conversation today. We were like, Luke Fickell, a lot of pressure on you, man. This is what you gotta, this is the year you gotta show some improvement, generate some confidence. Here's the schedule. It is one of the toughest in the country. So DK, you're 1. I'm with you. I think that this is a brutal slate where you get some of the toughest team. The only real Penn State power that they dodge is Penn State, right?
Yeah. And like we talk about the big 4 teams that are on the schedule, the Alabama, Michigan, Oregon, and Ohio State. 3 of those games are on the road.
Best.
Yeah. But even when you get past like Indiana and Illinois, who are going to start ranked, it's like, oh, okay, so the breaks are Iowa, Washington, at Minnesota. Like, it's a really difficult trip from start to finish. Like, they should be 3-1 to start the year, and then hell will be unleashed upon them. I had them 4th, by the way, on mine.
I had this 3rd. Like, I think we all agree this is like decisively a top 5 most difficult schedule in the country.
1-8 in conference play. A decent Wisconsin team could go 1-8 in conference play against this.
It's not out of the realm. No.
What do they have a single game after the first 2 weeks where they are a double-digit favorite?
No.
Maryland. They could be
Maybe.
a double-digit favorite over Maryland.
Maybe.
But I'm not going to guarantee it. But no, it's tough as hell. If they go 6-6, most like fans who aren't paying super close attention will probably be pissed and want Fickell to be fired. But honestly, if this team goes 6-6 after all the changes they made during the offseason, I'd be like, all right, cool. We're heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
It's so tough to be able to sell, to be able to, that is a tough thing to be able to sell to a fan base like Wisconsin. So it'll be fascinating here. All right, DK, why don't you take us to your? Let's see. You had
number
on
2. I had
2?
The Oklahoma Sooners. Non-conference. Their out of conference is pretty light. I mean, again, SEC teams, I did ding some of them for only playing 8 conference games, and depending on their non-conference. But even hosting against Michigan, I think that's a tough one for them. And then the road games at South Carolina, at Tennessee, at Alabama aren't exactly easy, especially that final month of the season. Hosting Texas, Auburn's supposed to be better. I know we hear that, often, But hosting Missouri, who was, again, double-digit win team last year, I had Oklahoma up there for me as the second hardest in the country.
I had them 6th or 7th. But again, one that I think was a very difficult cut. I do think that it is worth noting just how bad 3 of the 4 non-conference games are. This is not knocking this. I'm just saying, like,
Temple,
reality.
Kent State, and Illinois.
You get 2 bye weeks, and you also get 3. Like, Temple and Kent State are both easily bottom 5 teams in the FBS and are real underdogs to the good FCS teams. So you're essentially like Oklahoma could play all of its backups and still win both those games easily. So I do think they get significant rest on this schedule, right? But
though not in
and he's been
conference play.
dusty pilled.
That's right.
But in Oklahoma is not on my top 5, but I agree. Obviously, I mean, it's extremely tough schedule, especially when you've got Michigan on there in the non-con. But they in conference play, they don't get a breather. Like of the teams that we expect to be at the bottom of the SEC, hey, what's the most manageable conference game that they've got? Is it Auburn at home?
probably Missouri at home or Auburn.
Yeah,
or Ole Miss at home.
Those are tough games.
They are tough games. This did not make my top 5, and one of the reasons it didn't is because, I mean, outside of Alabama and Tennessee, like, those are your only real difficult road games, and we don't know how good Tennessee is going to be. Tennessee might not be very, so
South Carolina might be tough.
Yeah, but like a lot of those tough games are at home. So again, I'm not saying it's an easy schedule, but this is kind of why it didn't make my top 5, kind of just cutting it off there. And also, as Bud mentioned, Temple and Kent State.
Okay.
And like we'll get look. Honestly, I think like 4 through 8 for me was very interchangeable.
Sure.
And I'm glad we have different ones because it promotes debate.
Right. All right, DK, what was your 3? I think you're on an island for 3.
You didn't like this one. You guys didn't see this one coming up. I had Purdue on the slate.
Just because they're Purdue, so every single game is impossible.
You guys probably just wrote them off saying, does it really even matter? But they do catch some of the top tier teams, both Michigan, both Ohio State. At Washington's not either. Again, Indiana, Illinois, 2 of those teams that are right under that tier and might even be playing for a playoff spot. And then the non-conference road game against Notre Dame, catching USC as well. It just seemed like to me they were catching a lot of the teams from that, upper echelon of the Big Ten. I mean, they're an underdog in almost every game. I know they're non-conference. That the Ball State and Southern Illinois start isn't fantastic. It looks like a beast.
Yeah, I think when you grade on the curve of Purdue and then you look at that schedule, they're going to be like double-digit dogs damn near every single week. It is going to be a long season for the Boilermakers and Barry Odom, but
But if we don't grade them on a curve, there's no Oregon, there's no Penn State.
But there's Michigan and Ohio State in back-to-back weeks. You got USC, Notre Dame, Illinois in 3 consecutive games. Like, there's some really tough stretches. Yeah, you get the Northwestern Rutgers break. You get the Ball State, Southern Illinois, which is why this would not be near my top 5, let alone 3. But I get it.
If you wanted to make like a top 10 list, I would hear an argument for this being like honorable mention for a top 10 list. Top 5, it seems a little out there, but I get it. I just getting Northwestern and Rutgers and Minnesota, and I'm not trying to lump Minnesota in with Northwestern and Rutgers. I do think they're better than those teams.
All right, let's get to one we can be more agreeable on.
Florida.
My 4 is Florida,
the
Gators, which I'm sure this is almost on everybody's. It was talked a lot about.
Did anybody
last
not have
year.
this one?
What's that?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't have Florida in my top 5.
What?
Whoa!
I had him 1 with a bullet.
I got him 1.
Yeah. All right, let's hear this. This is good podcasting.
I'm more curious to hear Chip's
Chip,
take on why they're
defend
not in
yourself.
there. I thought I was dinging them being. I thought I was going to
Chip's
get
got
called.
no respect for the Long Island University Sharks.
Wait, you mean you were correct. I have no respect for the Long Island University Sharks. I mean, so let's go through this non-con, all right? Long Island University. I mean, that's just an easy win. South Florida, that's going to be good. I mean, they're going to go down to play Bad Vibes Beck. Are you kidding me? Like that is going to be an easy win for DJ Lagway. That's like the difference in quarterback play is worth a touchdown at least. And then you play the Knowles at the end of the season on your home turf. I mean, that's a 4-0 non-conference schedule. And I just think that when I was going through, everyone on my top 5 has a non-conference game that I'm chalking up as a loss. And I've got Florida 4-0 in non-con play.
Wow. Can we bet that? Can we do one little side bet?
I'll think they won't go 4-0 in non-con play.
A little side action.
I mean,
So they only have 6 home games.
Yeah.
Which I think is tough. Also, I think if you swap some of these home and aways, it gets easier. And I did this from the perspective of like a top 20-ish type team trying to make the playoff, because I thought that's why we're bringing this up, because there's been all this strength of schedule talk recently with the playoff stuff. There's so many losable games. Like you'd rather play Mississippi State on the road because they suck and you'd beat them on the road. But like I don't really want to go to Ole Miss. I don't really want to go. Like, even though I don't think Kentucky's any good, like I'd rather that's an annoying one to have to go play right after the Georgia game. At LSU, at Miami, at A&M. Every road game is very losable for this thing. You get Texas and Georgia, which is certainly tough.
Right.
Florida State will probably be but not terrible. I think. Tennessee, we'll have to see. I just like that non-conference is wild, and only the 6 home games. I had them number 1 by a lot.
Do you know what's what's really problematic and embarrassing for me? They have almost the exact same schedule from a strength of schedule as my number 1, which is just another SEC team. Like as I'm going through and I'm gonna make my case. I'm gonna be like, they've got to play Georgia and Texas and Tennessee. Those were all college football playoff teams last year. They've got to play Ole Miss and Texas A&M. Those were teams that were knocking on the door of the SEC title race.
Sounds familiar. Yeah, I think if you look at this schedule, like it's not unrealistic that Florida could go 3-3 at home with the teams that they've got to play in Gainesville.
Well, they lost at home to Miami last year, and they lost another home game.
That's what I'm saying. They could go 3-3 at home, and then they've got road games at LSU, Miami, A&M, Georgia's neutral, Ole Miss on the road. Like this is a tough schedule.
Even if they go 4-2 at home, they're still kind of screwed.
Yeah,
because of having to go to LSU, A&M, and Ole Miss.
If you go 4-2 at home, I'd be shocked if you are better than 2-4 away from home.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on Florida here? Wait, this was a good question earlier.
They also could be 2-2 for the first month of the season.
Yep.
And then you wonder, and they kept it together. They battled. They started off rough last year, kept battling. We just wonder. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. All right, Danny, and then you've got Rutgers as your 5th. I think you're
another one. I guess I didn't get the memo on the college football playoff teams making a run. Their schedule was pretty brutal for Greg Schiano and company to try to get out of that mid-tier level of the Big Ten.
It was certainly in the running for mine. I mean, look at that back half of the schedule.
The last 4 games might be the most brutal stretch of anybody, and that's after going on the road to Washington and playing Oregon at home.
No break. You're in Seattle on Saturday night playing Washington, and you've got to be back in Piscataway to play Oregon 7 days later.
Yep.
Gracious.
They did them no favors. No favors. You could have spread those games out a little bit more.
Ohio State and Penn. I mean, they are
back-to-back weeks.
This is no one was considering Rutgers when they made this schedule. And Rutgers just caught all the leftovers. Like, okay,
Mikey, take a note for me.
Last year was like the 12 months no interest.
Yes.
They got to pay.
Mikey, take a note for me. We're going to take a Penn State alt line on that November 29th game because Rutgers is probably going to be in some bad shape.
Yeah, end of the season coming out of Columbus. That's gonna be no bueno. So everyone agrees on that one. Rutgers definitely one of the toughest in the country. All right, Tom, why don't you steer the ship here? We know you've got Florida as your number 1. Let's keep it rocking.
Yeah, I've got Florida at number 1. Don't really need to go any further into that, I guess. At number 2, I've got Texas. They've got to play, their typical SEC schedule, which is difficult on its own. But then, let's start the season with a road game at Ohio State. And I think that you can argue their non-con of San Jose State, UTEP, Sam Houston is toss away, and I get that, and I would toss it away. But you're on the road for Ohio State. You're on the road for Florida. You're going to be on the road for Georgia. And then you've got home, you got the neutral site game against Oklahoma. There's Vandy, there's Arkansas. Like, it's a difficult schedule for a team that, when you look at how things went last year, 3 lost teams were left out of the college football playoff, 3 lost SEC teams. This is a team that's coming in, and we're talking about it as maybe it is the favorite to win the national title. There's a lot of room for error, or there's not much room for error here. There's a lot of games that this team could lose, especially if Arch Manning doesn't come out and isn't great right away. Like, they could get killed by Ohio State. They could lose on the road to Florida. They probably will lose on the road to Georgia based on what we saw them playing Georgia last year. So they've got to be perfect in a lot of pretty difficult games.
Completely agree. Yeah. I mean, at Florida now, I do like that too. If you're going to defend this, does everybody have them in the top 5?
No,
Right?
no.
I did not.
Chip does not.
Yeah.
Danny doesn't either.
I mean, they
Which I think
do
illustrates the
play
point.
3
They're
or
really
4 of the worst teams in
Yeah.
the SEC.
When you're looking for what you're looking for and what you want on your schedule and what you're looking to avoid, obviously Texas can't play themselves, so then you avoid one thing, and then you're also scooping up some of the teams that we project to be from the bottom, including road trips to Kentucky and Mississippi State, where talent alone means your B- game means you're probably not going to get tripped up. Famous last words, clip it, I know, but
Totally
I see a lot of people saying that, like, Texas has the bottom quarter of the SEC on their schedule. So I should include a team from the Big 10, Big 12, or ACC who also have bottom half teams from their leagues on there. The bottom quarter of the SEC is better than the bottom of most of the other leagues.
We would not have had Texas in this thing last year because they did not have that huge at Ohio State on there. But like,
that carries a lot of weight.
That in, like,
but that
Texas
much weight, that's where I would push back and say, I get it's one, and it's going to be a tough game, and it's against national champion and caliber and all that. I just don't think it adds that much weight. And like some of this, like we watched the game against Florida last year, right? Like they didn't even play anybody. And
Florida had the Yale kid starting quarterback.
Yeah, Florida didn't have anybody playing.
It was when Lagway did the hamstring thing. Yeah, I think this is the second type of schedule. I had it. Tom and I are in agreement 1, 2, maybe 3. I don't know. Well, no, I have Wisconsin 3. You had Wisconsin 4?
I had Wisconsin 4th, yes.
Look, I totally agree. Like the Vandy, Mississippi State, Kentucky stretch is a great stretch to potentially get healthy middle of the season, plus the bye week there. But
yeah, Arkansas at the end of the season too, before you go into A&M.
What other? Everybody would have Texas as the top 5 power rated team, right?
Oh, top 3.
Okay, yeah. Sure. What other top 3 power rated team has a schedule where you're an underdog 3 times?
Thank you.
Or potentially an underdog. Like you could be a dog at Florida, dog at Ohio State, dog at Georgia.
Fair.
Like that's wild.
Or you could be a 9.5 point favorite against Florida by the time that game is played.
If I would say only if Lagway's hurt, are you laying close to 10 in the swamp? But yeah, I mean that's fair.
And we don't know how good Texas A&M is going to be, and you got to finish the year with them.
Like there's probably 10 teams out there that you can make a really good argument should be top 5, which is what makes this fun. I didn't have Purdue on that, but I'm
Our good friend Gregory Sankey. Gregory is taking note of us praising Texas's schedule for when they're 9-3 and knocking on the door for an at-large. So I'm sure,
but only because the Ohio State game,
right?
Like last year, they had the gift of all gifts scheduled to start the SEC schedule or to start their SEC voyage.
Okay, and then what's your Tom?
I had Vandy at 3.
Vandy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
This is my Purdue, I guess, Danny. Me putting Vandy in here, but no, I think that this is just genuinely like a difficult schedule for the Commodores. They get Virginia Tech on the road in non-con, which is, they should. I think there's a good chance that they can win that game, but it's tough. It's Virginia Tech on the road.
Are they favored?
Probably by a point or 2 at most, I would think. You get South Carolina on the road, Alabama's on the road, Texas is on the road, Tennessee's on the road. Like that's a very difficult road schedule. And then at home, you got Georgia State and Utah State, but they lost to Georgia State last year. So let's not just assume they're going to win that game. Then you got LSU, Mizzou, Auburn, and Kentucky. I think that you look at the top of this schedule, it is a very, very difficult schedule for Vanderbilt to be dealing with. And I think that it's one of the tougher ones in the schedule, or in the country, which is why I had it at number 3.
I had that on my honorable mentions list.
Yeah.
I yeah.
You got
easily argue.
no outside of Kentucky, you got no no game that feels like, okay, this is going to be the one to make sure that we end up kind of in the muddied middle of that standings. Like when I think about the SEC, if you're not competing for the championship, you just want to make sure that you're not down there in the 2 and 6 part of thing. Cause those are where it really starts to get at fans. You want to give yourselves a crack at 3 and 5, 4 and 4, 5 and 3, kind of get up into that muddied middle, not look like you're in the basement. You don't get it. They're going to have to go out there and earn it. Go out there and earn it likely at home with those, Missouri, Auburn, Kentucky, those kind of games right there. Who knows? Go and knock off your in-state rivals there. All right. So Tom, you had Wisconsin at 4. We already discussed that. You had Arkansas at 5. Let's go through the Hogs. I actually do have the Hogs on my list.
Me too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty simple to me. Like you just non-conference, not that difficult, I guess, except Notre Dame.
Memphis.
Yeah, Notre Dame's in there. Damn. Oh, gee golly. Then you've got Memphis, who will probably be one of the teams competing for the G5 spot. You've got them on the road. You've got to play Ole Miss on the road. You've got to play Tennessee, a team that was in the playoff last year, on the road. LSU's on the road. Texas is on the road. You get A&M at home. Missouri is a team that has been one of the better teams in the SEC on an annual basis for a while now. Mississippi State at home is a gimme. Auburn, they probably should win. But other than that, like you look at this schedule, how confident are you Arkansas is going 6 and 6?
Dude,
Not at all.
no.
Yeah.
So-
I here was my note here. Conservatively, and this is counting Memphis, there are 6 teams on this 12-game schedule who have legitimate college football playoff hopes.
Hopes aren't reality, though. That's why I'm getting a little bit.
Well, do you think that LSU, do they have college football playoff hopes?
Definitely.
Yes.
Does
Texas
Tennessee
does.
Texas?
Yeah.
Yeah, Texas is obvious. Notre Dame's obvious. Ole Miss has college football playoff hopes.
Yes. So does A&M.
A&M has a college football playoff hopes.
So does Memphis.
Let's pull up Purdue's schedule and we can talk ourselves into some of those playoff hopes conversation. There's a lot of hope on these lists. Jeez. I think is he leaving us for the SEC network? This list is pretty heavy.
My schedule's based on my own power ratings. And
Did you see what FPI had?
Oh
FBI
gosh.
yes, I did.
Yeah.
I referenced a couple different strength of schedule objective metrics to like get my initial player pool together, essentially. And the FBI was the most SEC pilled stuff I've ever seen. I think
Next to Tom's list of tough schedules.
but it's, I mean, not to like
15 of the top 16 are SEC according to ESPN's FPI.
not to ruin the tease here, but
Seems
look, some of most of my toughest schedules are SEC and Big 10. Most of my easiest schedules are ACC and Big 12.
Yeah, crazy how that works.
Yeah, exactly. I had Arkansas 5, by the way. I mean, that's a really, really difficult schedule. Now they do get the A&M game at home this year. Like that's not one of those Jerry World things anymore, which is notable. But I mean, that's brutal.
Hey, you want to talk about make a note? At Memphis is a spot, like that is a sandwich spot of sandwich spots coming out of Ole Miss when the buzz around Fayetteville of the Notre Dame game is going to be through the roof.
Why would we? So Jim know in the chat says this whole combo is why USC doesn't want to play Notre Dame anymore. You guys don't respect it.
No, we
Notre
are
Dame's a huge respect.
We are overly respecting it.
Notre Dame was the differentiator why I had Arkansas in and Oklahoma out.
Yeah.
That's why I had
Notre
Purdue
Dame
on
way
the
better
list.
than Michigan to me. Like,
Okay, Bud, I know we've gotten through a couple of yours already. Let's get the 1 through 5 on the screen. Let you read it for those who are listening at home.
Ooh, there's a new one.
Yeah.
So a lot of matching. Again, I think for the most part, we're drawing from like the same 10, 11, 12, 13-ish teams here to go. The one outlier, if you're listening on podcast, I had Florida, Texas, Wisconsin, UCLA, Arkansas. So we'll go to the one outlier here that we had with UCLA. And, man, this just looks tough as hell to me. I think if you're using some of these computer models, they're not probably factoring in, like, Utah having a quarterback.
Right.
But I'm a human model, so I am, right? And like
UNLV being like you cannot just look at
Yeah.
UNLV as an easy G5 at all.
So you only get 6 home games, okay? You have to play Penn State, you You have to play at Indiana, at what is probably an improved Michigan State team. Utah to open, I think, is really, really tough. Nebraska at home should be an improved Nebraska team. At Ohio State, Washington, at USC. Also, the travel here does factor in for me. I like that is a lot of trips to Eastern time zone and Central time zone, which is, I think that starts to eat on you a little bit. So I think this is a really, really difficult schedule. And I had it fourth.
I had them. I broke down a whole segment of them, ended up replacing it. So I guess I would say they finished sixth. I totally agree with you on the Utah. UNLV is a tough non-con. There's no Michigan, there's no Oregon. So you do if we're splitting hairs here, but still, the travel can make up for that for sure. They traveled more miles than anybody else in the country last year. They will be among the top 5 in terms of distance traveled this year with something like that.
Also, Northwestern is probably a good bit improved this year, given that they have a quarterback as well.
I mean, UCLA's got a quarterback.
They do.
Okay, I can run through mine quickly, so we've got a little bit of time for easiest. My top 5. I've got Mississippi State at 1. Again, this is the one where I read I read all of the reasons that you had listed out when I realized that Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Texas A&M. Those are my reasons for Mississippi State. They are also very valid reasons elsewhere. They've got the reigning Big 12 champs, Arizona State, in non-con. That's not easy. And also on my notepad, they can't play themselves. And that when Florida and Arkansas are your most winnable games, and both of those games are on the road in terms of SEC play, not a great outlook for the Bulldogs right there. I've got Wisconsin at my number 2. We already mentioned that. Arkansas is my number 3. Now let's talk about the Syracuse Orange, all right?
Yes.
Oh, that's
The
good.
only
This is
ACC team that came close to my top 5.
I can't believe I missed them. Wait,
Yeah.
Chip.
All right. So Syracuse has the most brutal non-conference schedule in the Atlantic Coast Conference, because not only are you playing Tennessee in a quote-unquote neutral site game, not only are you going to have to play Notre Dame in South Bend, well, buddy, you got UConn. And I don't know if y'all been keeping tabs on UConn, but Jim Moore Jr.'s got the boys playing ball. Okay, we're talking about the Fenway Bowl champs right there that are going to be coming to town trying to make some noise against a retooled and reworked Syracuse roster. You get into conference play, Clemson, SMU, Miami. My top tier of the ACC is those 3 teams plus Louisville. So when you're drawing 3 out of the top 4 there, that's going to be a little bit tougher. And then an absolute absence of the teams in the ACC where you might feel like you can just sort of step on the field, not have your best stuff, not be totally healthy, and get out of there. That's Virginia. That's Wake Forest. That's Stanford. That's Cal. None of those 4 teams are showing up on this. So am I calling, your Boston College, your Georgia Tech, your Pitt, North Carolina? Am I calling those the world beaters? No, but the teams that I consider to be at the bottom of the league, all absent, brutal non-con. Tough conference draw. I've got Syracuse as my number 4.
Yeah, completely agree. This is very similar to Rutgers. Last year, Syracuse's schedule was an absolute gift to Fran Brown, and we knew this was coming back around. I mean, if Nico was still in Tennessee, you might have Syracuse 3.
Maybe. And then finally, for my toughest, I've got the South Carolina Gamecocks. A little bit of a late addition here in the process. But I was looking at it, and South Carolina avoids Georgia, Texas, and Tennessee. 3 teams from the SEC that made the college football playoff last year. Not here. Virginia Tech and Clemson, South Carolina are going to be a favorite against Virginia Tech, I expect, in that opener. But I think that they are going to be an underdog against Clemson, even with that game being at home at the end of the season. Look, your quote-unquote, you've got South Carolina State up in as your FCS opponent up in the early spot. The FCS slot of Coastal Carolina, you can't play all backups against the Chants in that game. You got to at least show up, tie your shoes, and be ready to play some ball. So that whole right column, as you're looking at, take it all the way to LSU. LSU, Oklahoma, Alabama, Ole Miss, Texas A&M. Coastal is how you catch your breath and then finish it against Clemson. I think the Gamecocks have a pretty tough schedule.
Yeah, but they don't play Tennessee, so they don't have to worry about that power T.
That's good. Good point. All right, with the little bit of time with the time that's left, let's go easiest. Let's do. Let's see. Where do we have the most crossover that we can sort of go team by team? Let's start with BYU. DK, you've got them at the top of your list. Let's bring it up and let's break it down.
First of all, a lot of mine were Big 12 and ACC, like you mentioned, but as well as the non-conference slate, catching some of the teams they're playing out of conference. Stanford, one of the worst teams out there. Portland State, East Carolina, they should be all lock-up wins there. They get Utah at home. The toughest road games at Iowa State, at Texas Tech, but the rest of the schedule looks fairly manageable. UCF at home. Again, I thought BYU's schedule lines up really nice for them, including a very manageable out-of-conference schedule.
Definitely had them on my list. They play, by all the projected metrics, with the worst 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams in the Big 12. The only team they miss is Houston. So 5 of the bottom 6.
I did have trouble trying to decipher what was an easy and tough schedule in the Big 12 for conference schedule.
I have a lot harder time figuring out how to order the top 10-ish in the Big 12.
But you've got UCF. Ooh, you've got Arizona. Ooh, you at least.
Yeah, that to me feels like if you're a team trying to make the playoff, those are walks.
West Virginia has 75 new players. Right. Rich Rod's great, but we might be year zeroing there in Morgantown.
Exactly.
I've got them 4th. BYU. Tom, looks like you've got
second.
2. Yeah. Let's see. Other notes here: no Arizona State, no Kansas State, no Kansas. Other notes:
no Utah.
No, you get Utah, but you get Utah at home. TCU also you get at home. And while UCF at home is not we were worried about UCF, it is you don't have to travel to Orlando.
Although I would say traveling to Orlando on 11/29 is you could find worse weather to play in.
Fair. Okay. Well, what's Greenville, North Carolina going to look like on September 20th? I mean, is that a mission? Is that a church write-off? To be able to be going to Greenville?
Sweating through the white shirts, man.
On September 20th. Okay. What about for DK? We'll stick here. I had Virginia as my number 1. I've got Virginia as the easiest schedule among power conference teams in the country, because when we go through the non-con, the way that Virginia has reached its official, not official scheduling requirement of a power conference team is to play NC State. That NC State game on September 6th is a non-con. So the non-con is Coastal Carolina, NC State, William and Mary, and Washington State. And that Washington State game is at home. So what are our big, long road trips? They are to Raleigh, Louisville, Kentucky, Chapel Hill, Durham, and then, yes, Berkeley, which will be a little bit of a hike, especially with games on either side of that. You are UVA. You can't play yourself, but you do draw Stanford, Cal, and Wake. And then the Florida State game, which for my money is one of the tougher games on this schedule. It's a Friday night game. It is at home. You'll at least be able to have whatever kind of environment you're going to get for that. You'll be able to fire it up right there.
Yeah, so every game they play except the Cal game is in the Eastern time zone.
Yep.
I did not have them in my top 5. They were close, though.
Okay, but you would not push back and say that Tony Elliott is being
no. It's not a difficult schedule.
Okay.
It's not Purdue's schedule.
Tom, why don't you take us to Houston?
For Houston, I had them at, I had them at 3rd on my list. And it's not all that dissimilar to what we just discussed with BYU as far as, who they're playing in their schedule. You look at their non-con, Stephen F. Austin, Rice, and then at Oregon State, I guess we could say maybe is difficult, but I don't know if the 2025 version of Oregon State is the one that comes to most people's mind as to what that program actually is. You're not playing Iowa State. You're not playing Utah. It's like you look at a lot of the teams that you expect to be, you're not, that are going to be the quote unquote favorites in the Big 12. Not that I think there is a favorite in the Big 12, but they're not on the schedule. And I think overall, this is very, very manageable for the Cougs.
I had them third on my list. Same exact notes as Tom there.
So I was thinking about, I've got Houston 2, and my note was Iowa State, BYU, Kansas State, Utah. Okay, think about those 4 teams. I would argue those are the 4 toughest road trips in the Big 12, both in terms of the caliber of opponent, the stadium environment, your home field advantage, all of those things factored in. So Houston not only avoids those teams, Iowa State, BYU, Kansas State, and Utah, but they also don't have any of those road trips along the way in a 9-game conference schedule. That is a gift for Willie Fritz after a really, really tough season last year. So I know that Houston fans are hoping that they can take advantage of this. It's not like they're going to walk to the Big 12 title game because they still have an uphill battle against some really quality Big 12 teams. But I do think that they got overall some gifts in terms of the way the draw broke out. All right, DK, who have we not hit from your easiest? So far?
Let me just get one on here because I want to make sure I'm the only one on here who actually looked across the landscape and actually had an SEC team on the easiest. But yes, they actually have cakewalks in the SEC as well. I had Mizzou on there. The 4 non-conference games: Central Arkansas, Kansas, Louisiana, and UMass. The only team they really play from the top tier of the SEC is Alabama, who they do get at home. And then the rest of it, catching Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, Arkansas on the road again, but one of the teams at the bottom, they get South Carolina at home. I think this is a very, very manageable schedule for Eli and company.
I agree it's a manageable schedule, especially in the context of comparing it to other SEC schedules. I don't know if I would say it's easier than a lot of other teams who aren't, in the Big 12 and the ACC.
Yeah, I ran my numbers on this. I still have Missouri easily as a top 30 schedule. So I have a top half of the Power 5.
Yeah, their win total 7.5.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe that's more about Mizzou.
At Auburn is way tougher than any Big 12 game, I think.
Purdue's win total's 2.5.
I will say the fact that they don't have a road game before
they
October
don't leave.
18th, yeah, that does kind of help a little bit.
How do they keep getting away with this? Has Missouri had favorable draws?
Isn't their rival Arkansas? It is nice to always get Arkansas.
Yeah. They're non-con. They do not. I mean, they've had some tough non-con games, so I'm not going to say they don't schedule difficult games, but they tend to play home in non-conference.
Who is their? Yeah, but don't we know their future opponents unless they go to? Do we know the SEC future rotation?
No. The SEC punted on anything.
The 9-game thing.
Yeah, so they got the reason why. If you had a tough schedule last year, you got a tough schedule this year. Favorable. It's because they just kept the same schedules. They only flipped it one for the other. Tom, do you need to?
No, I'm good.
Can we talk about the Deeks?
Yeah, they're my number 1 easiest schedule in the world.
Yep. Have y'all seen Wake Forest schedule?
I have them too. It is friendly.
It is literally the newest FBS teams that we have.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, wait, isn't whatchamacallit, isn't who's the other one that's joining?
Delaware.
Delaware and
Kennesaw.
Isn't there another school joining this year?
Yes, we are going to be up to 136 this year.
I can't remember the other one who it is though, off the top of my head. It's Delaware and whatever. Anyways, yeah.
So Kennesaw and Sam Houston were last year, right? In Jacksonville State.
Yeah, that was last year.
Yeah, Kennesaw, Western, and Delaware is one hell of a non-conference schedule.
Missouri State.
There we go, Missouri State. And then it's your road games are Virginia Tech, Oregon State, FSU, they suck, Virginia, and Duke. So it's like, I don't know, that's a very easy schedule to me.
No Clemson, no Miami,
no Miami,
no
Louisville. Like Wake Forest should be your ACC sleeper. This is a team that's going to finish
Notre Dame.
8-4.
No Notre Dame.
Like everybody, they avoided everybody. I know we talked about Virginia, but to me, this is easier than Virginia's schedule.
All right, and then
I think part of this depends on what do you think Duke is. At Duke is kind of hard. Do you think NC State bounces back? Georgia Tech. I had it pretty close. UVA and Wake, I think, are the two easiest P5 schedules by a lot.
And then here we go. The reason, listen, people are up in arms about ring cams. People are up in arms about, about the specialized shops in Nantucket, But the reason why there's still faith in Chapel Bill, is because I've got North Carolina as one of the 5 easiest schedules.
Me too.
I mean, let's take a look at this thing. Okay. So North Carolina, I mentioned the tier earlier. Stanford, Cal, UVA, Wake. Oh, hey, look, there's all 4 of those teams. And look, you do play Clemson and you play them at home, and there'll be a side conversation about why that's probably even better, just because it'll generate a lot of buzz. It'll be a hot ticket. It'll bring everybody in town. But there's no Miami, no SMU, no Louisville. There's not even a Georgia Tech or a Virginia Tech. Teams that have been a thorn in the side of the North Carolina football program. I've got Wake Forest and Virginia I have ranked ahead of North Carolina. North Carolina is my 5, but definitely felt comfortable including them in this conversation.
Yeah.
10 power, 5 opponents, 2 out of conference that have playoff hopes. That's where we're looking. I mean, TCU has playoff hopes. UCF was a national champion in 2017. They have hopes.
Hey, those are 2 title contenders from the last decade.
Out of those 10 Power 4 opponents, how many do you expect to be bowling this year?
4.
I mean, seriously. I mean, what's Bud's 8? Was it 8 ACC teams bowling? Is that your number from your bold prediction?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tom, I know you've got them on your list as well. Anything to add?
Yeah, I've got them at 4. It's a pretty easy slate for Bill to get started. Bill and Jordan should have plenty of time to go, to Montauk or whatever.
Y'all hear he talked this week?
Ooh, I did
About
not see
football?
that.
Then no.
Yeah, no, it was. It was like a true media availability. I mean, it just sounded like classic Belichick. He said so many words and also said nothing. I mean, he was just really right back in his bag. But the one piece that my little spidey senses or my antenna really grabbed onto is how often he was talking about the 26 recruiting class. He is lowering that bar and giving big year 0 expectations to the season. So
are we good on the Jordan Hudson deep dives? I feel like we've been covered.
Yeah, I think we've had enough.
There's multiple, come on. It's getting a little bit too obvious that it's clickbait. We got a new one out that was out over the weekend. All right, you don't have to travel to her hometown, dig dirt up on her. It's getting a little bit ridiculous.
All due respect, but I'm not sure how deep there truly is to go.
She hasn't been on the earth that long.
That's what I'm saying. What are we trying to unearth here, Jordan?
But it's so weird. It's so obvious what's happening.
Cut in line at the Walgreens.
Was that in one of those? In one of the deep dives?
No, but I'm just saying it will be in the next one.
Yeah.
From The Athletic, Jordan Hudson cuts in line.
In 3rd grade at the cafeteria.
Fills a water cup with soda. Oh, wait, that was New York Times on Jameis. All right.
So while Bill Belichick is making one of the calls of his career in the Super Bowl, Jordan Hudson was peeking at the spelling test next to her. Sources.
Was making a call without nights and weekends.
I was going to say
probably too young for nights and weekends.
She was calling in sick to her 1st grade class that day. If we're talking about Bill's first Super Bowl.
Okay. Any other easiest that we didn't hit? I know we've run a little bit long. I appreciate it.
I had Cal on mine.
Cal. All right, let's go. Let's throw it up.
I mean, the travel does factor in a little bit, but I just based off of opponents, your non-con is at Oregon State, who, again, I don't think is going to be very good this year. Texas Southern. You've got Minnesota and at San Diego State. But just kind of we discussed with Wake in the ACC, you're not playing Clemson. You're not playing Miami. You are playing Louisville on the road, but you're not playing Notre Dame. Just Stanford's not really a road game for you at this point. I mean, I just don't think it's going to be that difficult. But I don't think Cal's going to be very good, so I don't think anybody's going to care.
I with the travel, I didn't have them in, but I definitely see the argument there.
But if you look of their road games outside, like Virginia Tech and Louisville and BC are the only real road trips. San Diego State's in California, Oregon's Oregon, Stanford's California. It's literally across the bay.
Yeah,
It's true.
I could roll with that. And they can't play themselves.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any
Maybe
other
Maryland.
Maryland.
Yeah.
I had Maryland fourth.
They
Maryland
were in the running.
That is a gift.
All right,
I mean,
break it down.
So FAU, NIU, Towson should be 3 wins. At Wisconsin, who's probably a bottom 4 team in the Big Ten, unless you think they're good, I don't think that they're going to bounce back at all. Washington at home. Washington, I think, is probably a top 2/3 team in the Big Ten, but I'm not convinced they're top half. We'll have to see. Nebraska at home, at UCLA, which that's a tough trip, and you could certainly lose that game, but I don't think any legitimate playoff contenders worried about losing at UCLA. Indiana at home, again, if Indiana's still really, really good, maybe that looks tougher, but I think some regression is likely there. They get Rutgers too, at Illinois, not easy. They host Michigan, and they get Michigan State. So you get no Ohio State, you get no Penn State, you get no Oregon. You don't have to play like an Iowa, which could be really good with the new QB. The non-con is a cakewalk. I had this as 4th. This to me looks really easy. And I mean, this is probably the number one reason why Loxley is probably not number one on all the hot seat stuff.
I mean, the fact that there is not that big block O on that schedule after all those years of Maryland having to go up against the Buckeyes and playing them competitively, in some years, but that's that is certainly a reprieve and a relief. No Oregon as well, no Penn State. Yeah, those are all welcomed. Didn't Loxley go to Towson?
I don't know.
I want to say he's an alum, so that's fun. I only mentioned that because that's not only a local FCS opponent, but something that's probably
he did.
Yeah.
Also,
yeah.
no USC.
No USC. Yeah, that's good stuff. All right. Any other teams we want to highlight before we get out of here? Okay. So we will be back on Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. I want to let you know Lane. I want to let you know Brad. I want to let you know Coach K, Richard, and more. Your questions, we've taken them note. We're going to throw them in. But look, there's a lot more room for your questions from the tailgate. So come and jump in when the link goes live. Drop the question for the early bird chat. We will also be taking questions from the big old bag of mail. It's a mail bag Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Come hang out. And you can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fornelli. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow him at Danny Kanell. Follow me at Chip _ Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See ya.